Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tourism AI podcast. Thanks for joining us once again. And if you're brand new, welcome.
I'm talking to Robert Mitchell today. He is the, I think, Chief AI Officer. Is that right, Robert?
That's what they call
WSI.
me. That's what my
That's what
business
they
card
call you.
says.
Yeah. All right. So Robert's a pretty cool dude that I get to talk to quite often from the WSI world. So for context, for anybody who doesn't know, so CIPR Communications, the organization that I founded and run with my wife, that is also the organization that created the Tourism AI Network, is a member of WSI. So WSI is a global digital marketing network that really helps small, medium-sized businesses and larger businesses with digital marketing, all aspects of digital marketing. And it's really a network of digital marketers from around the world, subject matter experts, just honestly one of the most amazing networks I've ever been part of. And we do some amazing work helping folks in the digital marketing space sort of figure out that world. And, I always like to tell a story about WSI with respect to the founder, Dan Monahan, who started this organization, 2BG, as he likes to call it, 2 years before Google, because he saw this internet thing coming. And he said, we need an organization to help companies figure out this whole internet thing. And that's really relevant to this conversation because WSI is really an organization that's sort of seeing where things are going and getting ahead of the curve a little bit. And so, Dan Monahan saw AI coming, and he's been talking to the WSI network for a number of years actually about AI and its impact on digital marketing and its impact on business. And so, now we're looking at, okay, this thing is coming, and how do we help small, medium-sized businesses sort of figure out and navigate this space? And that's basically how Robert Mitchell came into my ecosystem in my world. So thank you, Robert, for joining me.
Hey, you might regret it in a year from now, but hey, at least you got me here.
At least I got you here now. Yeah. So why don't we start off with a bit about you and a bit about your background? I'm curious. You never told me this story, but how does
Uh-oh.
how does a, how does a person become a chief AI officer at an organization?
Well, it's funny you say that. I was about to say something like this, but it's kind of like a fake it till you make it kind of situation. Not that I am doing that now, but my point is there are no AI experts in the realm of what's happened in the last 24 months, right? AI has been around for 10, 20 years, 30 years, actually been since the 60s and the most basic version of it. So when I say chief AI officer, it's really not the versions that were there previously. What's happened recently is the generative AI kind of explosion through ChatGPT and other related sources. So large language models is specifically what we're talking about. But going back to your question, I've been in franchise development for all my life, or franchising all my whole life. So I've been in several different roles for 22 years in franchising, but I've always been tech savvy. I taught myself Photoshop and taught myself everything regarding electronics and technology. So I'm very savvy in that regard. So when this came on the scene, I made it my mission during Christmas break, which is last year or before then, Thanksgiving break. When it first came out, I was like, this is the coolest technology. I want to be an expert on it. And so every day, all day since then, I've been absorbing everything from scientific papers where I understand like a tenth of it to news articles to press releases to watching companies and using their tools. That's where you become an expert. And so I've self-taught myself to the point where I'm a subject matter expert. But I will say I'm also what they call it a Dunning-Kruger effect, where I basically at first I thought I was the smartest guy in the room, and as the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. And so I'm kind of in the middle right now as far as AI goes, and I think that it's one of those things where nobody's an expert. There's not a 4-year degree in AI yet, so even if there was, it's 4 years old. So that's the beauty of being an expert right now is you can be one if it within 6 months of just absorbing content and using tools and in your company the same way.
Yeah, and I love that story, and I think that's the story. Certainly, sort of my own story too, in the sense of, I just started diving in and figuring it out and learning and quote unquote becoming an expert by just trial and error and figuring it out, and obviously talking to guys like you and talking to some other folks in the WSI network and all those types of things. And so, I didn't mention in my intro, but so WSI is a trailblazing partner of the Tourism AI network, and so it's really important for me and the relationship with WSI because my organization, CIPR Communications, does not have a team of people thinking all day about AI and figuring out how AI is going to change the world and all these types of things. But WSI does. And so
Yeah,
can
we
you give
do.
me a little bit of context, Robert, in terms of the team you're building or the team you've built and sort of how that all comes to life to help organizations?
Yeah, we're constantly adding to our team, and these are all subject matter experts specifically in different areas of language models and natural language processing and automation tools and consulting. So, in order to build a team, because our big mission right now is to be the AI consultancy, trailblazer, as you mentioned very succinctly, and helping those businesses and governments and whatever accelerate their productivity and efficiency and everything else through an AI tool or product or service, right? So we're not taking a hammer looking for a nail. We are going into organizations as consultants and saying, here is an area that AI can help. Here's an AI area where AI can help. So we're not specifically building a team of just AI people. It's just basically those who are knowledgeable at AI who also have other skills, whether it be business and consulting or tech, because that's the key. And then on the other side of our team are the AI architects. Those are the actual developers or actual coders, the actual ones who are taking our instructions. So we tell the team this is what the business needs, and they go and develop it and design it based on the parameters of the engagement. So it's very, very structured, but also complex.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so to bring that to life for folks here on this listening to this podcast. So, I've been actually part of an AI, I guess, committee for WSI, a leadership committee, sort of looking at and testing some tools and testing some things that WSI has been creating. And one example of one of those things is called an AIBA. So it's an artificial intelligence business assessment. And so, I took a couple of tourism related clients through that process early, the beta version of that process. And really that process was about sort of having detailed, structured conversations about your business, about some of the business problems you're trying to solve, some areas where you think AI might be able to add some efficiency, those types of things. And really, again, having a structured conversation so that you can then understand how maybe these tools can come in and solve a problem, as opposed to sort of, coming in and start talking about the 50,000 different tools that are out there that you could use for whatever reason, right? And so that kind of conversation now has led to some projects that I'm, about to kick off here. So for example, one project that we're looking at is in the DMO space, so the destination management or marketing organization space. These folks have to do reports to their provincial funders constantly. And there's a whole process of putting these reports together, and the reports are painful and they take a lot of time. And so, with Tourism Kamloops, our client, we sort of dreamed up, said, what if we can use these tools or find a way to use these tools to make that process more efficient, more effective, faster, and more accurate, right? And so, that's an example just of sort of what Robert's talking about here with respect to taking a consultative approach and then having people that are these architects that can actually make these things happen and bringing the two things together to bring AI to life for companies. Is that sort of a fair?
Yeah, 100%. And I just want to give you a little shout out because, you mentioned that WSI is a trailblazer. We can't be trailblazers without guinea pigs. And quite frankly, Peter has been a brilliant guinea pig, and some of his clients, in some regards, have been willing to go through some of our testing. And he's been absolutely brilliant at taking what we've put together and applying it to some of these use cases, some of these needs that the tourism industry has. And he's been able to be like, you know what, this is an area where I can really upscale your business and your opportunity or your organization. So I want to say you're equally a trailblazer, Peter, as we are, being the first to market. Nobody's doing this.
Yeah.
Obviously the Deloittes of the world, but they only want, big, huge enterprise clients. So we are really thankful to have you on our team and helping to develop these opportunities, right?
Well, thanks for that. I appreciate it, Robert. And I think you said something really important there in the sense of really WSI, Tourism AI Network. We're here for the small and medium-sized businesses and helping them figure this out, right? So the big enterprise companies, they have tons of money, tons of resources. They have the Deloittes of the world. They have some of these McKinleys of the world, these really expensive, huge firms that charge massive dollars, whatever. Great firms, nothing against them, but I think we're in a different game here, right? We're trying to help sort of the again, the small medium-sized business sort of figure this out at a practical level, and I think that's a really important distinction, right?
Yeah, and can we talk about that a little bit? Because I think people don't quite understand how this applies to them. Like if they'll be listening to this podcast right now, they might be thinking, yeah, AI, that's technology, that's the matrix, or that's some kind of, different technology that I run a fishing lodge. Why should I care? Right. Well, the problem is you're running a small business, right? You typically you're wearing many hats, and typically you have some repetitive steps, repetitive processes, things that you're doing, tasks that you have to do on a regular basis that are annoying, that are repetitive, but you have to do them. Some of them are highly data specific, and some things you wish you could do better, but you just don't have the time, energy, bandwidth, expertise, you name it. And I hate to say there's AI can fix everything. Not necessarily, but what it can do is it can really help take one step at a time, one process, one task that you're doing that's highly repetitive and very, very data driven. And you inject an AI assisted automation into that. And boom, you just saved yourself 5 hours, 10 hours, 3 days, a week of just work or time, or maybe even make you better at doing it. It might not save you time, but it'll save you money. Might not save you money and time, but it might save you headache. So all these things are part of what AI brings to the table. And it's not like it's a fix for everything, but what I want you to think about, if you're listening to this podcast, there are parts of your organization that can be addressed by hiring another employee or by you working extra hours, but you could also be addressed by an AI solution. And I think that's that Peter's really honing in on, what the tourism industry and a lot of his clients. And I think that's really what I think we're trying to talk about with AI these days.
Yeah, no, I love that, Robert. Thank you for saying that. And I actually was on a call before this one with a current client where my wife wrote me into doing an AIBA. So I'm looking forward to your update on that tomorrow. But, the conversation there was, we have these processes where often communication gets missed and the right person doesn't get the right communication because this department has a tool that doesn't talk to this department's tool. And that to me felt like a really good example of a good use case where it's like, hey, if we can tie all these tools together and have some automated communication going out and making sure that the flow of information is working properly, that in itself would be a huge win for this company, for this organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, to be determined whether we can whether these tools will do it, but starting point is having the conversation, and yeah, this is a pain point. This is a problem we can solve or we want to solve. So let's see if we can solve it using AI, right? Or not even AI. Sometimes it's just smart automation tools
Mm-hmm.
that sort of are AI enabled, right?
But it would never have come out if we hadn't had that first conversation and delved into the organization. So sometimes, like you said, it's not a specific artificial intelligence, but it is spawned by the process that we had analyzed. The analyzation of organization is AI driven as well. So sometimes the solutions are generated by AI. And sometimes the artificial intelligence has a way of looking at the business in ways that's as much more insightful than you and I. That's what we honestly, at the corporate office, we're always talking AI should be at every conversation. It should be the assistant in the corner of the room that knows more than anybody else, but is in every conversation. So just in case you need to ask them their opinion, you can. That's kind of how we think of it.
Yeah, and I really like that. And I want to just sort of, before we move on from this small, medium-sized business conversation, I want to make the point that this is just my personal view, but I think you probably agree with it, where AI is a great, not only equalizer, but huge opportunity for small businesses, because large enterprise companies, they have a really hard time making changes. They have lots of moving parts. It's complicated. They have many different stakeholders and things to consider. Small businesses can be nimble. They can make change fast. So, you can, deploy these tools fairly effectively and easily and inexpensively, and really, really position your company ahead of some of these bigger companies, right? So I think it's a massive game changer for small, medium-sized businesses. Just
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. To be frank, you said almost identical what I'm about to say in just a different way. But the bigger companies, it's like trying to turn a cruise ship. It takes a while, and they're not quite as nimble. You said nimble with the smaller companies. They have too many mouths to feed. They have too many personalities to deal with. They have too many people to have to educate to adapt to new technology. It's so hard. So let me just tell you, if you're a small, medium-sized business listening to this right now, let me tell you that you can leapfrog your competition that's twice or 10 times your size right now if you do this implementation. There's things that you can do to make you look and feel and behave as efficient as them with half the team. That's what we're talking about here. And that's the the way that you can adapt some of these technologies at a much faster pace than your competition. And that's the key, grabbing market share, you know?
Totally. No, I love it. Yeah. So switching gears a little bit, Robert, I'm just curious. Obviously, you're talking to a lot of people when it comes to AI, a lot of quote unquote experts, businesses, corporate office type people. So kind of are there some major themes or trends or things you hear kind of consistent across the board around AI, like around fears, around sort of skepticism? Is there, just kind of paint a
Well, I
picture for
mean,
me?
the biggest one that always comes up is, will AI take my job? And I can give you my thought on that one. And then, of course, there's the Chicken Littles of the world where it's like they're coming for us and, we're all going to die and, they're going to be the Matrix. And, I don't think it's really worthwhile to delve into those hypotheticals because it isn't, we got a business to run. Like everybody's got a business to run. That's for the intellectuals to argue about. I think that the bigger concerns that people are asking is, how do I adapt? If this is the new normal, what are the first steps? And the first steps is to have the conversation and just start thinking about it and looking at it, because there's the two slowest things your organization you're going to have is your people, getting them onboarded. I use the example, if you were in the 1980s and you were 70 years old and you were a controller in the 1980s, and the boss comes up to you and says, okay, we're going to start using Excel now, you would have been like, I quit, because back then it was like green sheets and very basic rules. Everything was written down, right? So that person, in order to leapfrog to that technology, there's no way, right? Nowadays, we like to hope to think that that leap is going to be easier. So that's the struggle that people have. This the fear is that my team is not going to be able to adapt. They barely can do email. Well, that's a question we can talk about. But my point is that the fear is valid, but it's not unsurmountable, because this AI is not as complex as people think it is. That's my first thought is the people. And the other piece is can you adapt fast enough to outpace your competition's adoption or adoption of AI? And that's up to you.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I think I think I hear what you're saying and I agree. I mean, what I've observed about AI is actually that it's a lot easier. So if you think about the internet revolution or that came in and sort of the whole technology that came around that, like that was sort of like you needed some development skills. You needed to sort of like you needed some pretty techie kind of skills to sort of figure out and navigate that world. You need to, there's a
And
lot.
Java
Whereas,
to do a website or
yeah,
something.
whereas this is
Yeah,
literally we're talking about like you just like talk or communicate or write and then you get
yeah,
answers. Like it's amazing, right? And
yeah,
so all of a sudden
exactly.
it's super useful for anybody and super accessible for anybody, right? So it's a totally different kind of technology.
Exactly. Conversational AI is made it so it's available to the masses. It's
Yeah.
extremely accessible, and it's except for the fact that it's $20 a month. There are some free versions out there for GPT, but my point is, definitely accessible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I always like to talk about, there's sort of a few different steps that companies should be taking with respect to figuring this whole AI thing out. And, one of those steps is education and training. One of those steps is developing an AI policy or having some kind of like a corporate opinion about AI and its use in your company and who should use it and
Mhm.
how and why and all those types of things. And obviously things like an AIBA and sort of like having a discussion around sort of where the use cases are and what the opportunities are. So I mean, those are some of the first steps that I suggest. Are those kind of consistent with what you're telling people as well?
100%. Obviously, it's the first thing is a conversation, and the AIBA. So we do an assessment, as you know, which is kind of like a introduction to the conversation where we kind of have a preliminary assessment of your organization, just a little quick snapshot, like an hour-long conversation. And from that, we develop a roadmap to deep dive into your organization, which is called the AIBA. We deep dive into every department, every role and process that you feel like is relevant based on the first conversation. And from there, then we provide a roadmap of solution architecture. So like you need somebody in the sales team, you need an AI solution in the accounting department, whatever. And so we present that, in the next stage. That's a formal plan. But before even any of that happens, I think it's important to put a policy together, look at the culture of your organization and start talking about what it looks like. Specifically, I told you this, Peter, and you know this too from one of our favorite podcasts, is that you need to have some kind of policy for when there is deep fakes. If you have somebody in your organization that's your mascot or your president, you might need to look at some of the protections. The PR ramification is somebody taking and doing a deep fake on your main person in your organization, which it sounds like it's not a big deal, but you know what?
It's a big deal.
It's better to be safe than sorry. And there's nothing, it's worthwhile to, have a policy in place for that. But
yeah. And it's interesting. So I mentioned this in the last podcast I did with somebody else, but I always start my AI talks with two questions. Number one, who in the room uses AI? So I get a variation of 20% of the room to, I actually was in a room recently where 100% of people put up their hands, which was a big surprise to me. Question number two is, how many people's organizations have corporate AI use policies? Zero. Almost zero across the board. So that's such a huge disconnect, right? So just from a corporate perspective, it's like people are using AI in your organizations, whether you know it or not, whether they're telling you or not, whether you are telling them what to use and how and why. They may or may not understand the fact that some of the information they're putting into these tools may be proprietary and they shouldn't be doing that, right? So I think, to me, the number one starting point is literally sitting down and sort of having a bit of a policy discussion, right? And sort of a
right. And understand the tech. I think you made a couple, you glazed over a couple of very important, going back to your original question earlier about what are people afraid of? Data, privacy. They're like all scared, like, well, if I put it in GPT, then it'll know my secret sauce for Coca-Cola. It doesn't quite work that way. It might be trained on it at the worst case scenario, but you also can have access to the models where they don't train on your data, which is fine. But if you're building more complex systems, the people like ourselves or other AI architects can definitely create solutions that keeps the data safe. Okay. A lot of your data is on the cloud now anyway. So it's not like it's in your hard drive and it locks safe in your office. So there's ways to use AI that utilizes encrypted and secure methods. But don't be naive, but also don't be scared of something that's new. Try it.
Yeah, and I think that's where again, maybe even before policies is maybe get a little bit of AI education or training, or go to a presentation. Come watch me talk about AI and tourism, as an example. But those are the types of topics we talk about, or everybody who's in this space talks about, right? Is sort of like, some myths, some this, some that, and here's some things to avoid, here's some things to consider, and just get the brain flowing a little bit, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. Yeah.
Definitely.
Nice. All right. So maybe before we sign off here, I guess, do you have one recommendation that you give to absolutely everybody when it comes to artificial intelligence?
I have two that just popped into my head. Number one, obviously, well, before number one, get a subscription to ChatGPT Plus. Like, if you don't have that, then what are you doing? It's basic. It's basic 101. Get that and bring it to every conversation. That's not even number one. That's just kind of the preliminary. I actually had an argument with my friend, my best man at my wedding. I was best man at his. We texted back and forth for like an hour last night arguing because he's like, I don't have no use for that ChatGPT crap. He's like, I hate Siri. He's like, dude, it's not Siri. It's like, I can see it for businesses. Like, I want people to so badly just try it. Just try it. Like, and what I'm trying to say is, the number one recommendation is, for a week, use it instead of Google. So instead of Google, use ChatGPT, or if you want to, perplexity.ai, if you need the search functionality, but use the AI model to get your questions answered. Okay. Whether it be recipes or questions about light bulbs or whatever. Right. And the number two thing is, this is more of a tool thing, is if you have Zoom meetings on a regular basis and you're not using the Zoom AI feature or the transcription feature of the AI assistant, then get one. Fireflies or Otter or Build Better. Those you need to bring if you're having Zoom meetings a lot. It's extremely helpful, and it will automate some of the processes of transcribing your calls. So
perfect. Great. Fantastic advice. Super practical advice. So I appreciate it. So Robert Mitchell, Chief AI Officer at WSI, my AI guy. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Tourism AI podcast. To learn more about the network or get involved, visit our website at tourismainetwork.com or find us on socials at Tourism AI Network. We'll see you there.